In this lesson, we're going to learn about one more ICE concept before we begin working inside of Softimage. This concept is called context, and it is another factor on deciding if we can or cannot connect nodes together. So I've assembled this little scene to show the power and the problems that can come about if we don't take context into account. So quite simply, context is the background of the data we're working with. So there are a few different types of context. The most common is a singular context. Something like this sphere is a single object, and a sphere's scale only has, or a sphere only has a single scale. Now the torus also has a single scale. Now if we go into on a per point basis, we can say each point has a position. Now this position is different from a sphere's global position. A single sphere's position has a context of 1, or it is a singular context. Each point will have its own position. Now these point positions are going to have a point context. So we'll only be able to merge them or edit them with either a singular context or themselves. So what this means is we cannot take the point data from one object and apply it to another object. This is also true when we're working with particles. So in the last lesson, we learned that if the ports are the same color, we can connect them. So here I have two nodes that are just bringing in the position of our torus and our sphere. Now if we wanted to connect these two and add them together, we could. We can simply connect the values up and we have no problems. Now what happens if we try to do the exact same operation, just a simple add, with their point positions? Now up here we're using their global positions, which is a singular context. Now down here we're using the point positions, which are a point-based context. So you might be thinking these can work, but once we connect them together, we see that the add will no longer accept another connection, or it will not accept the torus point position. That's because our sphere is overriding, or it's setting the context of this add node. So we can see here that there's a context mismatch. The input context, let me just show this a little bit easier. The input context is a sphere, or a per point of our sphere. Now the output of our bottom node is simply a per point of our torus. But what ICE doesn't understand is how to connect these points together, or in other words, what is actually, or which of these points correspond to the other. And obviously there is no set correspondence, or there is no set this point is equal to this point while this point is over here. Now these two objects probably don't even have the same point count. So what ICE would have to do is it would have to figure out first which point is assigned to which point, and then if there are any points left over, it would have to figure that out as well. Now, just so we don't get into these kinds of problems, ICE will not let us change context, or it will not let us mix context. Now, however, it will let us mix any context with a singular context. So here we have our sphere's point position. So this is a per point context. Now we just saw that the torus point will not be able to be added in, but can we add in the torus global position? And we find out that yes, we can. That's because a singular can just be applied to every single point on the sphere. So there aren't any problems or sort of things we have to get around. So remember, we can use these singular contexts on a different context, such as a per point, or a per edge, or a per face context. And just to try to drag the point home, how should we connect up our color to brightness and our scalar to 40 vector? Well, we can plug them in, but does the alpha go to x, or does it go to w? Does it go to x and z, or none of the above? We're running into the exact same problem that Softimage has whenever it tries to mix contexts, in that it probably could do it, but there's no guide to how these two different data sets can work together. So remember, if something is not being able to be connected and it's saying it's a context mismatch, that means we're getting data from two different objects. Well, this is usually the case, that we're getting data from two different objects that cannot have a context match. So there are a few ways we can get around this. However, they do require a lot of nodes and a lot of almost lateral thinking. So what we should do is, whenever we run into a context mismatch, we need to try to find a way or a different way of getting the data and using it inside of the current context we're working with. So now that we understand ICE a little bit better, we can jump into Softimage and learn more about this interface and how we can begin using it to create powerful ICE simulations.